Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
And a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human.
The latest in social science, psychology, and American culture.
And what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley, what's going on?
Oh, it's a beautiful sunny day, and we're in St. Louis.
We're in the studio, which
and we're
is
in
nice.
the studio today. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of podcasts from home.
Yeah, a lot of Zooms. You were traveling. I've been traveling. We've been talking to guests out of state. So
Yep.
Zoom is handy for those times, but it's
Yeah.
nice to be together in person.
It is nice to be together because that's kind of why we do this.
Yep.
Yeah. So today I'm super excited about our conversation, and this is going to be a two-parter.
Yes, I am super excited. It's a two-parter because there's just so much to talk about and so much ground to cover. And I feel like we're going to end up telling lots of personal stories along the way.
Yes.
So we are going to talk about Mel Robbins and her book, The Let Them Theory.
Yes.
So I didn't know about Mel Robbins, which I guess I've been living under a rock because she's apparently
huge.
a really popular author. I think I heard her interviewed on a different podcast that I was listening to, and I was just like, who is this lady? She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she was talking about the book, and I thought, I'll buy the book and learn more about what she's all about. I think the thing that was compelling for me is the Let Them theory is sort of a modern repackaging of Stoic philosophy, which is something that I really believe is helpful to humans. And as we've talked about before on the show, Stoicism, one of the fundamental principles of Stoicism is focusing on the things that you can control and letting go of the things that you cannot control.
Right.
It's wise advice for any age. The thing that's cool about the Let Them theory and the book is, she just gives a lot of examples that are from contemporary life, right?
Yeah.
So the way that people are engaging with other people through social media or, debt in buying houses and careers and, just things that, we could learn a lot of these things from Marcus Aurelius and sort of try to,
extrapolate.
Yeah, to our modern moment. But it's kind of nice to have somebody who's just sort of speaking directly in the modern moment. The other thing I really like about Mel is how actionable, it's so clear, simplified, and actionable for accessible to anybody, which I think is really powerful. And I think she's really pretty humble and open about her own life and the challenges she's faced, the things she's gotten wrong, the things that, have worked out. And, it's always really compelling when somebody's just open and honest about the things that a lot of us are really vulnerable about. Yeah. So,
that's what's the things that I've seen, that I've heard, and, I've seen a lot of videos, and about her, on her podcast.
Yeah.
And that's what's always struck me is how authentic she is, how willing she is to just
put it out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So we're going to be challenged to put it out there as well.
I know. And so the way that we're going to do this in terms of the two-part framework for this, the first episode, the second episode is going to be, and it's this way, it kind of follows the way that she structured the book. So the first half of the book is more, setting up the Let Them theory and then talking about how to apply it to your own inner life, right? So the way that you're moving through the world in your own mind. And then the second half is more about how you apply this to relationships with other people. And the other thing that I should mention about Mel that I thought was really compelling, and is just, I don't know, it's sort of a good reminder for all of us, but she opens the book with, at the age of 41, I found myself $800,000 in debt, unemployed, and watching my husband's restaurant business crumble.
Oh my God.
I know, right? And then you know, it's like, I can't remember what her net worth is now, but like
A lot.
a multi-millionaire, right?
Yeah.
And so you're sort of like, hey, you know what? It's never too late at any age to take responsibility and like figure out, you know, and that was kind of what she tells the story in the book about. It was a visit to a friend's home who they had just moved in this big, beautiful house, and they had, you know, done construction project, and she was excited for her friend. It was somebody she really adored, and like someone who her and her husband had both worked really hard, and she admired, but she just felt so intensely jealous of what this other person had, and just comparatively with the state of their life. And they get in the car to go home, and she has this interaction with her husband that is pretty pointed and sharp, and kind of like, why did you have to go into the restaurant business? You know, because and sort of blaming him. Yeah. And she says, she was like, I can recount this story so clearly because I've had to unpack it in therapy so many times. But for her, it was a moment that where the let them theory started to like really take root, because she didn't know about the theory back then, but she saw like something switched in her that sort of was like, if this is what I want, I need to stop waiting for somebody else to do it for me. Yeah. And I need to do it for myself. Yeah. Right. And so anyway, I really love that, you know, that someone has sort of gained so much ground and popularity, delivering a message about like taking action in your own life and trying to create for yourself the world that you want. And I think we, you know, we've sort of moved into a culture of a lot more victimhood, and I see this both on the left and the right, where it's a way to score points and a way to showcase your, you know, value in some way. And I just think I frankly think it's just bad for people. I think it strips away your agency. And it's I don't know, it's not empowering. So this is an empowering book.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's interesting too, because and we'll get into like just what the basics of the theory are. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that this idea of control, which is really kind of at the heart of what she's talking about, and how to unlearn those instincts to try to control others, right? Yep. That is actually connected to what you just said, to victimhood, right? I mean, that's that you wouldn't necessarily think that would follow. True. You would think that somebody in charge of their life and everything would be able to control everything around. And that's the lie, right? Yes. That's the lie we tell ourselves as humans. Like, if I want to have agency, then I need to control. And really what you're doing is you're placing yourself in a victim.
Yeah, and you're going to strain all of your relationships. Yeah. And that's sort of what... okay, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Okay. So we're going to back it up a second and just kind of talk about the framework. So let them theory, right, is the whole idea is focusing on the things that are, you know, within your power to control, and letting go of the things that are not within your power to control. Right. And one of the things that I think is really important about that message is it's actually two parts. It's let them and then let me. And the let me is almost more important than the let them, or they're equally important. But if you don't do both, you actually that she has found from readers, if they're just doing the let them part, they actually feel worse. Yeah. Because they're not taking the agency for their own life.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah. And that was my criticism when I first heard about this theory. I was like, wait a second. This feels very passive. This feels like trying to avoid responsibility for, you know, and and so that was my first kind of instinct. So
yeah. And the let me part is so important, because it's not just about I mean, she kind of talks about that people don't really change, right? Like, right.
Let's go back first. I feel like we need to kind of outline this a little bit more specifically. Yes, ma'am. So let them. When we talk about the let them, what does that mean?
It means, let's see, what is the? I want to give you the exact title of the chapter, because I think it's chapter 1. Stop wasting your life on things you can't control. Yeah. And so it's sort of identifying, right? What are the things that are in your control and what are the things that are not. So like the example that she kind of gives to kick off the book is her son is going to his senior prom.
Right.
And he, like her daughters had decided, months before what dress they were going to wear and how they were going to do their hair and all, they had planned everything out. Right. And he sort of was like, I don't even know if I'm going to go. Decides like the day before, oh, I do want to go. Okay, now we got to go to the mall and get an outfit. And he wants to wear these tennis shoes that she thinks are kind of, and so she starts trying to micromanage his experience. And, he starts to get that like bristling reaction from her son, who's just like, can you just let me live my life? Right. And what and there is some nuance here because she does sort of say like, you can't just use this. This theory in the way that it's laid out in the book is for interactions with adults. Yeah. I mean, her son is, a young adult at this point. But so like, she's like, if you can't use this with your 5-year-old, because if you say, let them do your 5-year-old, they'll just eat ice cream all day and, whatever. So, but there is a place. Right. And especially with your kids, it's more about letting them be who they are.
And also letting them make mistakes. So in that story, right, at prom, it's raining. They finally get to prom. It's raining. And then she finds out that the kids that her son is going to prom with don't have any reservations for dinner. And then they decide they want to go to this little like hole-in-the-wall joint, like a little taco joint, which literally won't even fit them all in there.
Yep.
And she's like, you can't go there. You can't go there. and her daughter just turns to her and says, Mom, if they want to go to the taco joint, let them.
Yep.
And and that was just like a huge light bulb for her, right? Because it's like, who cares?
Right.
Who cares if the girls' dresses get wet? Like, there's consequences to those actions, but maybe those consequences of the action are the ones that they want.
Right.
Maybe they want some crazy, story that they can remember forever.
And that people aren't going to learn if you don't let them have those experiences.
Right.
There is a chapter in the book that, I don't know if I have the title exactly right, but it's something to the effect of the more you try to rescue, the more they drown.
Yes.
And I think that's hard. It's hard because, we love people. Most of the time, the desire to control does come from this, like, you do feel this love for this person and you want to like, not lose them, or you want a specific thing for them. And I got the sense reading it that she was somebody who really had a lot of desired to control a lot of things in her life.
Yes.
And so it was really powerful, and her relationships got so much better when she kind of backed off.
Yes.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the book, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I can't help it. Is she talks about from a romantic partnership standpoint. She's like, you have to kind of think about, this is a Gottman thing. So the John and Julie Gottman, they talk about how, I think it's something like 70 or 80% of all of the fights you have in your relationship are the same fight you're just having over and over again.
Over and over.
And so then she's sort of like, when you get stuck in this cycle, you sort of have to ask yourself, like, is this fight something that is a deal breaker? Like, if this never changes, do I still want to be in this relationship? Yeah. And if the answer is I still want to be in the relationship, then she's like, you need to like back the fuck down, right? Like, you have to like let it go, because she's like, if you keep harping on this, you're just going to continually damage that relationship over and over again. You have to figure out how to just say like, okay, I'm not gonna focus on this anymore, because it's not that important.
Right. And I wonder too, like, I just had this conversation with my daughter, actually, this just like yesterday. Like, I also just think, those conversations that like, let them happen.
Yes.
Like it's okay if you have those same arguments over and over and over, because that's how we work through things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, and this is something my husband said, which I thought was really interesting. He's like, it's not always the same it's not always the same argument. You have to listen, because it's usually a little different, even though it sounds the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, good job, Bill. That was good. It was insightful. But I mean, there's also a let them, like, let it happen.
Yep. Yep.
Don't try to change what the natural
and understand sort of like, I think to Bill's point in that, which is interesting and really what the Gottmans are getting at, and Esther Perel, who I love, has a similar sort of thought on this, but is that most fights in a relationship are about, do you value me?
Yeah.
Like, am I important? Do you love me? Like it's the same kind of things. Do I matter to you? And that's at the core, really, at the end of the day. Even though you might be fighting over who's doing bath time or how come this is messy,
right?
Or whatever, whatever the fight is.
Are those the things that come up in your house?
Not the bath time thing. I don't really mind bath time, but my wife is not a tidy person. I am also not by nature like the most tidy person.
Yeah.
But because of my relationship, I have had to like play the role of the tidy person.
Right.
Otherwise, our house would
be chaos.
It would completely devolve. And so the fight that we often get in is I get frustrated by like dishes in the sink and our laundry situation is always just crazy.
Well, you have
I know
3 kids.
And the thing is, it is really hard for me to just walk by it and ignore it. And she doesn't even see that it's there.
Yeah, see, that's me.
It's like, oh my God.
So for you have to just let it.
I had to let it.
You have to let it go.
Yeah, it was. Hold on, I want to give you the exact framework for what she calls this, because it was like, people only change when they feel like it. She's like, though, when you're dealing with other people, trying to force them to, anytime you try to force somebody to do something, it creates resistance.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
So this goes back to the deal breaker thing is either end your bitching or end the relationship. And so the answer is like, if you're not going to end the relationship, end your bitching. And that's what I actually told Lauren when I was reading the book. I was like, I'm going to let it go. I'm never going to bring it up ever again. And I'm just going to have to figure out how to not care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. The other thing is if you're the Lauren in the situation, which often I am the Lauren in the situation, I can start feeling guilty if my partner's like taking on things that I don't want to do.
Yep.
And then I start kind of like becoming not resentful, well, maybe resentful or just worried, like, oh my gosh, are they mad at me? Or, are they doing, and it's like, and then I realized, no, you know what? People don't do what they don't want to do.
Yep.
So I can just let them clean the dishes or do whatever that I hate doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can, and without guilt, because people don't do what they don't want to do. And if he really wants me to do it, he'll ask me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if it drives me crazy, then I'll do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Rather than, harping. I know.
So that was a good one. That was a good, it was a good lesson there.
Get out of the relationship or stop bitching.
Yeah. End the relationship or end your bitching. Yeah.
That's good. That's classic. So the part 2, we're going to talk more about like relationships and how this works in relationship.
Yeah. And friendships.
Mm-hmm. And so this part 1, we're talking about how this actually works kind of from our story, my story kind of place, like what my life, how this works. So
the beginning part is sort of like, hey, life is stressful and that's just part of life. Yeah. Right. And, so it's sort of just kind of like accepting the world as the way it is. Right. And then the second part of not the second part of the book, as far as like the first part of the book, but as she's kind of moving through the theory is how we worry about what other people think about us, right? That we spend a lot of time worrying about other people's opinions or what if I do this or what are people going to think? And she's like, let people think bad thoughts about you. Yeah. She's like, because they are. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter.
And she was like, I think bad thoughts about all the people I love, right? All the time. And so she's like...
So we go around with this like kind of like halo thinking, nobody has any bad thoughts about me. And God forbid anybody have any bad thoughts about me.
Yeah. And she's like, just think about, as you're moving through your day and you're thinking about, your kids or your spouse who you love more than anybody in the world.
And they drive you
crazy.
They
drive you crazy sometimes. And you sometimes think bad things about them. And it doesn't matter.
It's
right. So that was, I thought that was a pretty good, lesson. And then my favorite part of the beginning of the book, there was 2 parts where she talked about just life isn't fair. Yeah. And that is okay. Yeah. And if you spend a lot of time focusing on the reasons it's not fair, like you're never going to make any progress.
Right. And I would say, I don't know if it's necessarily okay. I mean, there are definitely parts of life that are not fair, that it's fine that it's not fair. And there are certain parts of life that are not fair and it's not okay. Yeah. But.
Yeah. Well, she kind of focuses on like, okay, when you're in comparison, and this is a big part of this section that I thought was really interesting, was focused on, how so the things that we are worried about in our own minds are often, right? It's like, what are people thinking about me? And then what am I thinking about other people, right? Yeah. I'm comparing my life to this other person. And it's like, okay, well, if this other person was born taller than you, richer than you, like a better athlete than you, all these things that you have no control over, like focusing on these things is not helpful to you. Right. And so, but the other piece of that is to be thinking about, are there things like that you admire in other people, or maybe that makes you jealous, that are like, hey, that actually is achievable. If I put the work in, I could have that for myself, right? Yeah. And as opposed to sitting around saying, well, this isn't fair that so-and-so was able to achieve this or that. Right. She kind of talked about it in a way that she said, for a long time in my life, I think I thought sort of success was zero sum. Yeah. If somebody else was successful, that meant like they've already taken the success or something, right? That there isn't enough to go around. Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of us like almost probably on, some fundamental level, feel that in our lizard brains.
Live in that scarcity mentality.
Yeah. And it's more like an abundance mentality, and so she talks about how to make comparison your teacher. Yeah. And I feel actually like this has been something, I never heard it framed exactly in this way, but I actually think this is one of the things that has helped me the most in my life, is that I don't typically feel like super jealous of other people, but when I do admire somebody, I'm like, how do I do that? Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to be around them, and I want to learn more about how they're doing what they're doing, right? Yeah. Finding those teachers or those mentors that you're just like, how do I suck up all of the thing that they have that I would like to have in my own life? Yeah. And I never really thought about the fact that was something that was really actually helping me along my journey.
Yeah. And that it could have easily have, you chose that path, right? Yeah. Where you could have easily chose the kind of comparison path that led to resentment and kind of running away. The other thing, I was listening to her talk about this theory, and she said, when she was talking about like the prom situation, and she said the that trying to micromanage people or control people, she said that's like the symptom. That's like what happens. But what's really important to really ask is, what is it that makes us want to control? What is that, right? To control other people. And I think, so these are the things that make us want to control. This idea of comparison, these are kind of at the core. And you might not think like, oh, I'm jealous of somebody, therefore I'm going to jump out and try to control the situation. But those controlling reflex, it's almost like a defense mechanism, like a fight reflex, right? And like what you're talking about, that zero sum game, that's kind of like a flee reflex, right? Yeah. So, I'm comparing, and this is, I'm never going to have this, so I might as well not try. Yeah. So now I'm going to flee the situation, and I'm going to take myself out of that that experience. So I never even have a chance to achieve that because my fear is that I can't.
Yeah.
Or I won't.
And I'm afraid if I fall on my face or if it doesn't work out, that people are gonna, what are people gonna think?
What are people gonna
think? And it's like,
think?
let them think bad things.
Let them think bad things.
Because,
right. So the let them can kind of work in that fight reflex by saying, hey, simmer down there, Bessie, like calm it down and, pull it back and let's really look at your relationship to what's happening here. And also if your impulse is to just totally resist, which might look a little like letting them, like I'm fleeing. Oh, well, you're not fighting. Okay. You're not trying to control the situation.
Yeah.
You're running away. Well, why are you running away? Well, because I'm afraid of what people are going to think, or I'm afraid. Well, and then the let them comes in too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. And one other example that she gives that's sort of the like reverse of that is still worrying about what people are going to think, but like trying to decide what to do. So she tells this story about how there was a man who was, I don't know if they read the book or listened to a podcast or whatever, but he wrote her this letter and he's like, I'm supposed to get married in 3 weeks and I don't think it's a good idea, but I don't know how to get out of this situation. Right. My parents have already made the down payment for the reception. Her family's going to be so upset. She's going to be so upset. Like I proposed to this person. Like, how do I undo this?
Yeah.
And
I bet that happens all the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then people would just go through with it. Right.
Of course.
And so she was like, sometimes, and this is what's really hard because as human beings, and I think, most people are good people that don't want to hurt other people, right?
Right.
And so you're in that situation, you probably do, you do genuinely care about this person. You were in a long-term relationship with them.
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt them. But in some ways, the kindest thing is to end it now before you go through with this. But that feels like it's that you're hurting everyone, And so there's that tension, like, how do I deal with that?
Right.
Right.
And so she would say, well, let them be mad at you.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. That the right thing to do is to just let everybody be mad at you.
But in that situation, I would say the fleeing would be.
Right. That's what I was saying. It's the reverse.
Well, the fleeing would be going through with it anyway.
Yeah. or just being the passive.
Or maybe that's more of a freeze reflex.
Freeze, right? Or
I'm just not gonna act at all. I'm just gonna gonna let life just pull me where it may.
Yep.
And not have any agency in this and that. Yeah. I would say that would be a freeze.
We do that, don't we? And the that freeze or that like, just sort of being passive. So she as I had read about her and her background and where she first became sort of popularized, it was in this, she wrote a book that's called The 5-Second Rule.
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't read the book, so I can only tell you, I read like a couple essays that sort of described what this was about. But it was, I think it was probably this time in her life that she was in debt, feeling depressed, things were not going well. And it was sort of I can't get out of bed, And so she started doing this thing where it was just, I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And it was, if I have this like feeling in my body of I should do this, I'm going to give myself 5 seconds and then I'm going to do it.
Wow.
And so it was like, I got to get out of bed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, out of bed. Like, get up. Like,
wow.
And it was, so every, when she was trying to make progress in her life, she just kept saying, giving herself this countdown to action.
Yeah.
And I know, right?
I can tell you exactly what Enneagram type she is.
I
think she's probably, I don't know. I would say she's probably an 8 with a 9 wing because that's her need to control and kind of micromanage is definitely in that 8 space. But that, right? That's the not like the 9 wing is
that when if the 9 wing going to like the good place?
Like 9 is just like, so your Enneagram, you your dominant type, and then the types on either side, you can lean towards one, and that becomes kind of like a flavor or another, like a secondary type. And so the 8 is either an 8 with a 7 wing and an 8 with a 9 wing. So, I mean, she could be either, but I have a feeling that's probably where she lies. And that whole thing, I mean, that would be like 9s can get pretty passive when they're, when they're stuck.
Yeah.
And then the thing to get out of that is like just do the next right action.
Yes.
And that's what she did.
Yeah. And I guess in the way that she told that story, it was she started using it in her own life and was making progress. And then she was like, I didn't even tell anybody that I was even doing this in my own mind for like a year. And then she tells her husband,
which is also really smart.
Yeah.
If you find something that works, don't just use
like,
it.
Let it ride.
Let it ride for a while.
So, and then so she tells her husband about it, and then he starts using it, and it's like improves the work that he's doing. And
I love that she just uses herself as this little like lab. Yeah. This little psycho, spiritual, social lab.
100%.
Yeah. Which is what we all
do, right?
Yeah.
And and then she started like once she had sort of seen the progress in her own life and seen the progress for her husband, she was like started talking about it more. And
super smart. I mean, that's what you do. You don't go out with a patent right away. You know,
right.
You have to do a lot of research.
Yeah. She also talked about, and this is kind of goes back to the like let them think bad thoughts about you, So she when she started talking about this 5-second rule, she started doing a lot more public speaking. And her she's sort of like in the back of her mind, she's like, my friends are probably like, well, who should take life advice from Mel? Because, I've had all these other problems, right?
Yeah.
But she's sort of the person that says, yes, I have had these problems, and this is how I learned how to deal with them, and it worked for me. So I'm hoping that it might help somebody else.
The other, this also just rings true for me. Mindfulness, right? When John Kabat-Zinn kind of started formulating, Buddhist mindfulness as a kind of a scientific neurological process to work with people and as mindfulness-based stress reduction. He started working with chronic pain patients at Massachusetts General Hospital. And he started teaching them mindfulness practices. And the basic, the main tenet, the kind of core of the work is that you cannot change your suffering, right? That's like a Buddhist principle. We will suffer. Suffering, unfairness is part of life.
Yeah, life is hard.
Life is hard. Suffering is going to be present in your life. And for these people, that suffering was their chronic pain. So he's like, I am not here to heal your pain. This is not, but your relationship to your pain, and this is what she's talking about with Let Them, right? Your relationship to your pain, your either need to control your pain or your stress about your pain, or is my pain going to go away, or whatever it is, my self-pity around my pain, or whatever those feelings of victimhood, whatever that is, if you can let that go, and, the mindfulness and the meditation practices were the method by which we let that go. All of a sudden now there's so much more space for so much good in your life that the pain patients actually started to feel less pain. The pain wasn't gone, but they started to feel it. So you realize, some of this pain, some of this suffering that I'm experiencing isn't actually the pain, isn't actually the suffering. In fact, the majority of it might be my relationship to it. And when I started really studying this and then practicing it myself, one of the fruits of the practice was that I was less afraid to use my voice because I cared less about people saying bad things about me.
Yeah.
So I do think, especially for women, because we're the people who leave the meeting saying, did I talk too much?
Yeah.
That having these kinds of practices or these kinds of mindsets, help us find our voice.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And that idea of just even sort of reframing as, resetting your expectations, it changes everything, right? So, I mean, everything we experience is just so relative to what our expectations are. And I was joking with, oh gosh, I wish I could remember who I was just joking with about this, but because I could, if the context would probably be important, but essentially I was something to the effect of like that. I genuinely think one of the keys to happiness in my life is that I have like almost no expectations for like other people or like what's going to happen. And it, if that's the way you move through the world, you're more likely to be delighted.
Yes. Everything is a surprise.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at that.
Yeah. So,
and that's, and that speaks especially to our children, right? It's like we can go through life, feeling like we are doing that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden when it hits like with our children and we're like, oh, but no, I have this expectation.
Right.
And it's really not about them. It really is about us.
And that's where she's talking about in the part that is about using the let them theory with kids, because the thing that's important there is about just letting them be who they are.
Yep.
And that is letting go of some of these expectations that you are holding for them. Obviously you want to be supportive and you want to help guide them in terms of, and you can do that by being a good role model and like showing them the path by just emulating, the right things and hope that they pick up on that. Yes. But it's up to them to figure that out for themselves. And if you try to micromanage their lives, like it's going to create resistance in that relationship. Yeah. Right. And obviously, you have to step in if they're doing something that is going to result in real harm, right, as a parent. But if, it's more about just, I don't know, how they will perform in school or what their relationships will be like, or if they're messy or not, or what, all these things that are sort of like, it doesn't matter. Right.
Well, I have an example of that.
Yeah.
So, and like, probably like, I don't know, in my growing up, it was like the highest stakes example, right? So, I grew up in a home, evangelical Christian home, where basically my parents believe, if you do not believe X, Y, and Z, you're not going to be with them in heaven.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So, that's how I was raised. And so in my first marriage, there was a lot of me trying to control, kind of what we did as a family. And I was like, we have to go to church. We have to do this. We have to do that. And my kids have to go to Sunday school. My kids, and I because that story was really powerful. And there's something that she says in the book where she says, if people aren't going to do what you want them to do, right?
Yeah.
You focus on you. What do you do it?
Yeah.
You do the thing.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until after, and that wasn't why my first marriage ended. But after my first marriage ended, I, through a couple, bunch of different things that happened, that's when I kind of threw myself into a much more kind of space of spirituality. And it was no longer kind of this space that my parents kind of dictated. It, for the first time, really, like I had to say, I'm going to let my parents believe what they're going to believe. And if they're mad at me for believing these things that I believe, I'm going to let them.
Yep.
Which is really hard.
Yep.
And I'm also going to let my kids be who my kids are.
Yep.
And I'm not going to buy into this, awful hellscape story. And I'm just going to focus on me. And it's been like the richest, journey of my life. And, like, will I say like, oh, my kids have some deep spiritual faith? Like, I don't know, but that's not for me to really judge, right?
Yeah.
And like the things that my kids have said to me is they'll say, Mom, I really love the way you love God.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's
perfect.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're letting you.
They're letting me.
Yeah.
They're not trying to kind of talk me into something that's not.
Yeah.
And that, and if I want them to like engage with me and, like Easter, come over for Easter and, let's watch church on TV or let me read you something, and I don't think they're indulging me. I think they're really saying, we want to be a part of this thing that's really important to you. Yeah.
That's so nice. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. But it did not work the first way.
No.
At all.
And it creates resistance and tension. And
I'm sure it did have something to end I'm sure that was definitely
underlying
that there was that was definitely part of the marriage ending.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah. I think for me, my resistance to religion has a lot to do with that. I feel like I recognize, and I think we've said this fairly clearly on the show. I understand the value that bringing people together around in a community with shared beliefs that is supportive, that gets people to care about values that are important to the world, and to pass on wisdom and instruction. Like these are good things. And I actually think that there's a lot of there's been a lot written about the decline of sort of participation in religion. There's starting to be kind of a resurgence,
but for kind of creepy reasons. In some way.
Is that right? I don't know if I know exactly what.
Well, I think the increase in church attendance is between like 18 and 24-year-old men, like conservative men.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, so maybe that is they would like to have more control over their lives or something, right?
Yeah.
And they have, interesting. Yeah, I think, but yeah, my resistance to religion and religious organizations, even despite me seeing the value that is clearly present in the ones that are, oriented around the right things, is that it is trying to exert control, right? And I mean, in a way, like, it makes sense. That was kind of the way that the world was organized before we had governments that are exerting control over their citizens, Right. I mean, there is a certain kind of structure that we have to put in place for people, but it's really like, for me, as someone who's gay, it's like, well, you're trying to control something about my life that is just not gonna change. So I gotta move on, right? But so that's interesting.
And I'm not gonna take us here. I won't take us here, but I will just say, I just listened to the podcast Ross Douthat and his interview on the AI guy.
Oh, I don't think I've seen.
Oh my God, it's so terrifying. It's so terrifying. But I will say, when we're talking about like institutions and things that control, like, we are putting so much time and money and all of our eggs are in this AI basket.
Yeah.
And we're putting all our eggs in a basket that we are creating to control us.
Yes, we are. Actually, I want to hear. I mean, we'll do like a little AI, tangent, and then we'll wrap part one, and then people can join us for part two. So give me the AI tangent.
Well, so this guy, they wrote a thing called. It's not called Project 2027, but there's something about 2027, and that basically this guy, brilliant guy, he used to work with Google. I think it was with Google AI, and he left because he just felt like they were not being responsible.
Yeah.
And this development of artificial general intelligence.
Yeah.
That it's. I mean, basically, he just extrapolated the data.
Yeah.
And said, like, basically in 10 years, they're going to kill us all.
Yeah.
It's just going to kill us. And it's just going to decide it's going to kill us. And then it's going to project out into space and, whatever. I don't know. But it's like, I mean, it is like the stuff of movies. And he was like, once we get an AI plumber, it's all done.
Yeah, for sure.
And they kind of talk through like what the projection is, and it's like, all these jobs are going to be gone. They're going to have some kind of, what do you call it? The income.
Yeah, universal basic income.
Yeah, they're going to have it because
there'll be so many people unemployed.
But GDP is going to like explode
because all these businesses can make money without like employing anybody.
So either they're just going to let everybody get rich and then everybody's going to, I don't know, die, or there'll be like 15 people in the world, but or they're just going to have to support us. And then maybe we can all just be artists and do podcasts and think about things and not have to worry about it. I mean, that would be lovely.
I don't think that's how it's going to work out.
I don't think so. But basically these guys ended the podcast just saying, I really hope we're wrong. I just really hope we're wrong.
Yeah. I hope it, I actually I kind of think they're right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the timeline is right.
Yeah.
I hope the timeline is wrong, but
yeah.
I do think that we are, building something that is going to be outside of our control for sure.
Well, and then this is interesting. Now, is Steven Pinker, is he like one of like the famous atheists?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So the other article I read today, that
love Steven Pinker.
You love Steven Pinker, yeah. So the other article I read today, which was maybe in response to this one yesterday, was AGI is actually far off into the future and to the point where we don't know. And I think it was interesting that Pinker responded to it because he was like, there is nothing that is all powerful and all knowing, omniscient, omnipotent, because what we're trying to create through this is like God.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that atheists might be the detractor who say, you know what, that's just not even possible. And the thing that they would have to come up with to program the thing to make it this, we don't have the capacity to even comprehend something that's magical thinking.
Well, that actually gives me a lot of comfort because I trust Steven Pinker a hell of a lot more than I trust Ross Douthat.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Elon Musk and these guys. I mean, these are all the guys that are saying it's all going to happen.
Yeah.
They're also.
Yeah. No, but I do think that there will be job displacement, how quick that's going to happen, what jobs it will displace. I mean, there's also a certain level of, every time you go through a technological revolution, there are jobs that we lose and there are new jobs that emerge, right? If we all lived in the 18th century, we would all be farmers.
Right.
If we lived in the 19th century, we would all work in manufacturing facilities.
Right.
If we, in the 20th century, we had the knowledge workers. In the 21st century, I think it's going to be people who are the creators, creative people.
Yep.
I kind of hold out hope that it is the polymaths and the generalists, the people that have sort of a broad range of experience and can kind of see big picture will do well.
Yeah.
So
and maybe liberal arts education will come back.
Here's to hoping, right? All right. Well, this has been a very fun,
conversation.
Yeah, free-ranging conversation.
So next time we're going to talk about how this theory plays out more in relationships, which we talked about a little bit. You can't really talk about it without talking about that.
Yeah.
And then we're also going to talk about kind of like, how do we do that? Like, how do we recognize when we are in a place where we need to let go and let them, because oftentimes we don't have the kind of self-awareness to even know when that happens.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's one thing that I failed to bring up from the first part of the book, but it is talking about when grown-ups throw tantrums is the chapter title, and it's essentially discussing that most people don't have a lot of emotional maturity. They haven't been taught to have it.
Right.
And that it is something that you like a skill you have to develop.
It is totally skill-based.
Yeah. And so that when you kind of can have that awareness that most people haven't done that work, it can let you have a little bit more empathy for those individuals and an ability to say, let them. They're still on a journey,
Yep.
and it doesn't mean they can treat me poorly, but it just means like I can see that, right? And then I can think about how I'm going to respond to the situation.
I'm going to end with just one more cat-like thing, and this is in the podcast that I listened to where she talked about this. She kind of started with this, and that is like there are certain times when she doesn't want you to let them, and I want to make sure that we say this, and that is if you are being discriminated against, you do not let them. If you are being, if your boundaries are being crossed again and again, or even just once, you do not let them. And then the third way was, with young children, you don't just let them. So I think that's really important that we say that this is not.
It's not an it's not an excuse to let people treat you poorly.
Right. And I think that's what we're going to get into next time too. It's the let them and let me. So if somebody is crossing a boundary, okay, well, I'm not going to let them. Yeah. But I am going to.
But recognize they're probably not going to change.
Right.
And then I need to take some sort of action to create distance between myself and that person, or take the steps that are, to empower myself. Right.
Yeah. And to be authentic to who you are and honest. Yeah.
It's good stuff, man.
It's good stuff.
All right. Well, I can't wait to get into it. We'll talk about relationships next time.
Thank you for joining us on Atheist. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with a friend. We really appreciate our listeners. It's because of you we keep growing and connecting with new people.
We always love hearing from our listeners. Get in touch with us at atheistpodcast.com, follow us on our socials, or leave a comment on this episode.
Atheist is produced by Justin Sywell of STL Podcasts.
Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.